This lavender smells so good. Hey, welcome, welcome. I'm just going to turn the light on because it is starting to get dark. There we go. But yeah, welcome, welcome. I'm Z. I use they, he, and Z pronouns. And thanks for hanging out today. We are celebrating Black History Month by reading this zine about Black Vermont farming. I am joining from Indakina, so-called Vermont. And we also have a community care space in Lenape-Hocking, so-called Philadelphia, which will be having some awesome community events, again, starting next month. Now that it's warming, will be warming up, right? Fingers crossed. But yeah, let's check out some awesome things that are being said by Black farmers in Indakina, so-called Vermont. And so the zine starts with texts visited. So one of the texts visited is called Farming While Black. Isn't that artwork beautiful? If you're someone that likes artwork in your literature, share this live, drop a heart, because I don't care what age you are, beautiful art in a book or a zine can really add something. So this says, learning about Carver, Hamer, Watley, and new communities, I realized that during all those years of seeing images of only white people as the stewards of land, only white people as organic farmers, only white people in conversations about sustainability, the only consistent story I'd seen or been told about Black people in the land was about slavery and sharecropping, about coercion and brutality and misery and sorrow. And yet here was an entire history blooming into our present in which Black people's expertise and the love of the land and one another was evident. When we as Black people are bombarded with messages that our only place of belonging on land is as slaves, performing dangerous and back-breaking menial labor, to learn of our true and noble history as farmers and ecological stewards is deeply healing. Welcome, welcome, and that is why I am an organic no-till farmer in Indakina, so-called Vermont. My name is Z, for anyone just joining. And check again this beautiful page. From Black Vermont Farming, an awesome zine that we were gifted as panelists in Farming While Black panel, hosted in so-called Middlebury last fall by the college, an awesome organization, and a great student named Bailey, and Acorn Food Network, and an awesome woman named Lindsay. So the next text visited is Black Food Matters. Absolutely, because Black Food Matters, written by Hannah Garth and Ashante M. Reese. They say that Black Food Matters brings together authors who examine production, distribution, and consumption through the lens of anti-blackness to explore themes of fugivity and disposability, the consumability of blackness and black food culture, and the everyday resistances that are produced in the making of black food geographies. There is nothing broken. The inequities the food system produces are functions of how it should work, as the push to maximize production and consumption while devaluing labor are integral to capitalist productions. Reading Black Life, Refusal and Self-Determination in Food. What survives? That's the question, right? Who and what dominates mainstream environmentalism? What responsibility comes with owning land? One of the authors says, my partner and I have joked that we have 3 children, Nashima, Emmett, and this land. Your land becomes a family member and a daily obligation. It is a relationship to enter into after detailed research and with care. Owning our land, growing, outworn, educating our own youth. Participating in our own healthcare and justice systems, that is a source of real dignity and power. To farm while black is an act of defiance against white supremacy and a means to honor the agricultural ingenuity of our ancestors. While my practice is primarily rooted in voodoo, my spirituality is diverse and complex as my family's mixed ethnic heritage. Haitian, Black American, Hebrew, French, English, Cherokee, Taino. I am Manye. Yes, I am also a Jewish, Unitarian, Universalist, Haitian Voodoo Assant, initiate of Rota, and worshiper of Ifa. I make spiritual herbal baths, chant Torah in my synagogue, dance to auras divine with shells and bones, and receive dream messages from the ancestors. For me, the truth is the intersection of our multiplicitous mats of knowing the sacred. Now, I need to get my reader because it's getting dark. Welcome, welcome. I'm about to get my reader so we can read this scene together because it's getting dark. Hey. Yeah, I have pretty severe visual disabilities, and it is tough for me to read without my handy-dandy reader that magnifies and illuminates. The essence of prayer and sacrifice is the acknowledgement of beingness of the non-human energies of our worlds. Do you have family members or ancestors who are farmers? Where and how did they farm? What stories do they tell? And again, we are reading Black, Vermont Farming. Welcome, welcome. I'm Z. I use they, he, and Z pronouns for anyone just joining. Next page, text visited. Black food geographies. Black food geographies. Black food geographies is a love letter to and an affirmation of what is possible when we listen to Black people's food stories beyond an all-encompassing narrative of lack. The historical and ongoing significance of race at the intersections of capitalist accumulation, dispossession, and residential segregation requires an understanding of how the geographic distribution of food is a reflection of anti-Blackness and oppression as much as it is about class and economic capital. How have Black people been challenged by and resisted unequal food access? How do quiet food refusals show up in everyday life, right? What happens when we examine lack, choice, and decision-making as dynamic and interrelated processes in accessing food? So that's from Black Food Geographies. Next text visited, Black Earth Wisdom. Black Earth Wisdom. Let's see. In this time, we are acutely aware of the fractures in our system of runaway consumption and corporate insatiability. We feel the hot winds of wildfire, the disruptions of pandemic, and the choked breath of the victims of state violence and the victims of state violence. We know there is no going back to normal. The path forward demands that we take our rightful places as the younger siblings in creation, deferring to the oceans, forests, and mountains as our teachers. Those whose skin is the color of soil are reviving their ancestral and ancient practices of listening to the earth to know which way to go. All beings are sacred. There is a covenant of moderation. Nature is cooperative and generous. Nature is queer and trans. Nature does not hate. Our common languages are song and resilience. Land is the basis of freedom. We can't breathe. We are kin. And that is from Black Earth Wisdom. Let's see what else they said. Theorizing racism in the food system deepens our understanding of the extent to which food institutions are implicated in continued disinvestment in Black neighborhoods. For just over 4 years, I focused on these everyday ways residents navigated food inequities. What emerged are these quiet food refusals, the ways that Black residents expressed agency, care, and dissent in their food procurement practices, in their memories, and in their hopes for the future. What does a community garden seek to accomplish? How does it do so? What does it need in order to do so? And if you have tea or water, you're more than welcome to drink. And that's why we give out free seeds to Black folks like these. Non-GMO and organic, often heirloom seeds. Because it's important. Supermarkets modeling a trend in convenience in American consumerisms ideally make grocery shopping easier. For Black urban residents, however, they become another manifestation of inequities that shape access to a number of resources. What about corner stores, liquor stores, delis? The garden represented their determination and desire to remain where they had planted roots. What types of food are considered healthy? In this context, feeding the community took on greater meaning than providing fruits and vegetables. Feeding meant youth development, visions for entrepreneurship, and potentials for strengthening relationships with parents and caregivers. He, Mr. Harris, explained every plant to me, where it came from, how he cared for it, how it behaved inside versus outside. Plants in recycled plastic, juice containers, planters and seeds, and leaves in recycled Jell-O containers crowded the single window in the living room. He grew various peppers, tomatoes, lemon trees, orange trees, and a pine tree in his apartment. Let's see. Let's talk about the history of slavery in so-called Vermont, in the Kina, right? So we have some pages here. You can see the ships, right? And I'm going to read this here. Welcome, welcome. read this here as well, okay? You can see some of the path here. All right. Slavery, chattel slavery, carceral slavery has a path. Paths, has many paths. They intersect. A Tale of the United States, Race, Land, Capitalism. According to estimates from the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, 12.5 million Africans were brutally ripped from their land and transported to the so-called New World. Around 10.7 million Africans survived the Middle Passage, disembarking in North America, the Caribbean, South America, and Europe. The enslavers treated Africans as property, inflicting upon them physical and sexual violence, tearing apart families, and suppressing cultural identities in order to compel them to work. In the so-called United States, legalized chattel slavery forced generations after generations millions of Africans to work on sugar, tobacco, cotton, and coffee plantations, in addition to the white settlers' homes. Since the inception of the so-called United States, unfathomable violence has tied race, land, and capitalism together. And that's why no-till organic black farming is important, and that's why we're doing it. Because we cannot continue to be forced into cities that are polluted, that are full of cops, that are racist. We have different choices if we get together. And so that's one of the reasons we have a rural space and an urban space, because we have to continue to build that solidarity across borders and across environments, urban, rural, right? It has to happen. So that's a part of what we're going to hear about in the scene right now. In so-called Vermont, while Vermont is the first colony to abolish slavery, chattel slavery, in 1777 Constitution, slavery still lingered within the state for another 30 years. Harvey Amani Whitfield, Jane Williamson, scholarship from Kevin J. Graffagnino, Elise A. Gayette, John M. Lovejoy, Harvey Amani Whitfield, Jane Williamson, and Robert M. Vanderbeck paint a more colorful picture of what life might have been like in these lands that we now know as so-called Vermont. From their research, we learned that early Vermonters' enslaved population consisted of primarily indigenous peoples and imported Africans. Even the 1777 Constitution, which Vermonters tout as being the most emancipatory of its kind, created conditions that permitted child slave labor to persist. Due to the vague enforcement of this decree, slaveholders would often forge documents that betrayed the accuracy of a person's age. Laws such as the 1779 Ordering and Disposing of Transient Persons Act, 1779 Maintaining and Supporting the Poor Act, 1786 Sale and Transportation Act, 1806 Prevention of Kidnapping Act show that while de facto slavery was on the decline, de jure slavery indentured young people of color and incarcerated poor adults of color into coercive bondage nonetheless. And here we breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. I'm drinking water. Just for folks that might be hearing impaired, like myself, I don't know how to get closed captions on here. I would love some support with that. But I can at least verbally say that, like, I'm a brown-skinned black person with medium freeform locks that the sides are cut shorter into a tiny fro. I have a golden septum ring and some nostril studs, as well as a piercing through my earl or bridge between my eyes, through my skin. I also have some colorful earrings with faux feathers and a light colored cream button up with the background has some black fans running and has some wood ceilings. So yeah, we're going to keep reading. We're going to take a breath. In through the nose and out through the mouth. Therefore, no male person born in this country or brought from overseas ought to be holden by law to serve any person as a servant, slave, or apprentice after he arrives to the age of 21 years, nor female in like manner after she arrives to the age of 18 years, unless they are bound by their own consent after they arrive to such age, or bound by law for the payment of debts, damages, fines, costs, or the like. 1777 Constitution. So they're essentially saying, oh, if you agree to slavery legally, right? And they're saying this in the context of not allowing black folks to read, right? Not allowing black folks to gather, not allowing black folks to be human, right? We're sitting in that. If we're sitting in that together. If we're breathing in that together, right? Wherever you are viewing from, you're more than welcome to share or drop an emoji that reminds you of where you live. We together are uncovering truths, keeping them alive. Because if we don't place these words in a colonial language, in a colonial context, it can be skewed, right? Touting Indokina, so-called Vermont, as a place that is progressive is just not necessarily accurate. And that's something that this zine is pointing out, and I think is really important for us to examine together as a whole as we figure out, right, what we believe, what we see, what's going on. Oh, no, I hear that. We're going to read more, right? We're here together. We're in the mountains, so I get the lagging. The famous 1777 Constitution also created a new class, free black Vermonters, so-called free, right? Before Vermonters, much less the rest of the country, knew what to do with itself. As these free black so-called Americans waded through ambiguous definitions of personhood, statehood, and nationhood, they nevertheless led complex and yet humanly simple lives, starting families, participating in the local economy, and fulfilling their hopes and dreams sometimes. Some left detailed testimonies of their lives in the Northeast, and others are remembered in the town plan, land deeds, tombstone markers, wills, and census records with which we can only begin to guess at how they lived. But I can connect to that progressive front that falls apart with some interrogation. I'm from so-called Illinois. Thank you for sharing that, Nye Divine. Yeah, it's just like we don't have to pretend like we can heal a lot faster if we don't pretend we can heal so much faster. So let's read another page. In Vermont, Ulysses A. Guyet's Discovering Black Vermont pieces together the story of 3 generations of free black Americans who built their life on a hill in Hinesburg, Vermont. In doing so, she traces the life and lineage of these pioneers in order to reconstruct the Vermonter myth that the ones who conquered the wilderness and built the state's democratic institutions were white. Because that's just not true. Like, black people have survived everywhere. Black people have thrived everywhere. Black people have grown food everywhere. And we are too, and we're a part of that legacy. Not only did white Vermonters enslave people, enslaved and free African Americans made up a significant portion of the Vermont landscape. So much so you'll be shocked to find that the most recent census shows that in certain areas there were more black people in Vermont in 1790 than there are now in 2024. What does that say? What does that say? Let's breathe in. For most of Vermont's early history, larger percentages of black people lived in white households than headed their own. For instance, in 1790, white people headed 83% of Vermont households that contained any black people. That leaves only 17% of households containing people of color being headed by a free black man or woman. For all the years of this study, white people controlled between 50% and 83% of households that generally 83% of households included black people. In 1820, when age information is supplied for the first time for people of color, we discover that black servants were generally 14 years old or over, while 1/3 were children 13 years old or under. 2/3 of these young servants, so-called, were girls. In 1830, 1/5 of Vermont's black servants were 9 years old or under, 2/3 of them girls. In 1790, Virgins was 7% black and Ferrisburgh 2.5%. In 1800, Braintree was almost 3.8% black, and in 1810, Windsor was 3.6% black people, or was people of color overall. Burlington was 3.4% free people of color, and Heinsberg almost 2%. In 1790, Virgins was 17%. Oh, I just read that, my bad. Early documents reflect the racist attitudes in American law in reducing black Vermonters to numbers upon a ledger or their names, if any, scattered throughout probate documents. The violence of the archives in erasing the humanity of black Vermonters notwithstanding, documentation is further complicated when generations removed. Families would pass as white in order to achieve social and economic mobility. We must actively push back against the popular conception of Vermont as a white space. This myth erases the multitude of black stories told here in this beautiful state and delegitimizes the need to create liberatory geographies everywhere. Welcome, welcome. We're reading from Black Vermont Farming. In Vermont, so-called Vermont, right? We call it Indakina. That's the indigenous name by Abenaki and Munsee Mohican folks. Let's take a moment of silence for them and take a deep breath in. How does that breath feel in your body? Because it feels good to me. Oh, yeah. A nice neck roll. Let's see. Elise A. Guyette's Discovering Black Vermont pieces together the story of 3 generations of free Black Americans who built their life on a hill. Oh, it looks like the same thing is printed 2 times. And that is great. Me too. I'm also grateful for it. The mechanization of the textile industry and the invention of the cotton gin in 1793 expanded the need for African laborers to farm cotton in unprecedented quantities. Enslaved labor made white settlers extremely wealthy. Although slavery was mostly contained in the South, through agricultural labor, the northern businessmen benefited economically from the trading of cash crops internationally and all the raw materials that went towards the American economy. And for one thing, still do. Gonna sip some tea, gonna drink some water, gonna take a breath. And then you can see the artwork portrayed here. Yeah. General William T. Sherman Special Field Orders. As the so-called Civil War was winding down, Union leaders gathered a group of 20 Black leaders in Savannah, Georgia, with the goal to set up a plan for thousands of newly freed men in January 1865. When asked what would help his community, Garrison Frazier advocated for land. Land. The way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and turn it and till it by our own labor, and we can soon maintain ourselves and have something to spare. Now, mind you, we are a no-till organic space, right? So, like, obviously, he's saying that, like, spiritually, metaphorically, communally, but we're not gonna till the soil. Don't till it, don't touch it, don't do it. See if your city, town gives free compost or free mulch. You can use that and farm for free if you have any land. You can also do no-till organic farming in pots, right? If you're in an urbanized space and you don't have access to land, you can grow in pots in community, even if that's just a couple herbs and a veggie in a pot, right? Let's take back our autonomy as Black folks to growing food. And welcome everybody. I'm Zia, use they, he, and Z pronouns. And if you want to connect, feel free to email us at the farm. And thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. We're reading out of this awesome zine that we were given for free. Black Vermont Farming, Black Vermont Farming. Thus became the Special Field Order 15, promising the freed slaves 40 acre and a mule from confiscated Confederate land. This order was rescinded in the fall of 1865. However short-lived, this order marks a historical legal framework for reparations and provides a glimpse into the importance of land ownership. Well, land stewardship, because it's like you can't own land, you know what I mean? It literally existed before you existed. You can't own it, but I do understand legally stewarding it so that the colonial state cannot rip it away as easily. In so-called Vermont, Guyette cites in Discovering Black Vermont many accounts from Vermonters and other New Englanders alike of how life used to be, what it used to be like. Positive and negative testimonies abound. A piece by Edward S. Adby, an English traveler in 1833, recorded that northern Black Americans would sit down to the same table as whites and that their services are more wanted in the country than in the towns, to which Guyette backs with the 1860 Vermont census that shows an almost equal percentage blacks and whites employed as farm laborers. Other reports provide conflicts that are nestled within larger racial and class hierarchies. Discovering Black Vermont delves into the history of the Peterses and Clarks, two families that lived on what they renamed after the war as Lincoln Hill. Guyette writes that the women joined rural networks of both blacks and whites, and the men voted in town and state elections and fought country wars. The two families owned both land and properties and made money off of farming and working for their neighbors. The Clark extended family 1795 to 1870, and the Peters extended family 1798 to 1870. You can take a look at this. I don't know why it's flashing. I guess it's just the reflection of light. Sorry about that, everyone. Next page. Ooh, let me drink some water, actually. Checking in with my body. Thank you for joining in. I'm Z. I use they, he, and Z pronouns. I'm a no-till organic farmer and community in Lenape-Hocking, Philadelphia, and Indakina, so-called Vermont. Right now we're in that space, the second space I just mentioned, and we're reading an awesome zine by Crystal Zhou called Black Vermont Farming. Have you drank water today, y'all? Have you taken a deep breath? Have you stretched, right? Have you listened to Septober Beats, an amazing black beats maker and sound space creator? Next page we're going to read. After the so-called Civil War, many newly freed men returned to the land to continue their livelihood. Despite discrimination laws, sharecropping arrangements, and violence from white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan, Black farmers owned 16 million acres nationwide, the all-time high national average in 1910. In 1920, the USDA recorded that black farm operators made up 14% of all U.S. farmers. That declined during the Great Depression. Then that declined in 1964. The USDA recorded that black farm operators made up only 5.8% of all U.S. farmers. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights investigates unlawful distribution of loans by the USDA after mass protests. In 1982, the USDA recorded that black farm operators made up to 2% of all U.S. farmers. In 1997, the USDA recorded that black farm operators made up to 0.9% of all U.S. farmers. 1997, severe decline, and now we're at 0.4%, and we're here to change that. So that's all tonight, y'all. Join us again tomorrow. Tune in to listen to some awesome local black history. I'm excited to be in community with y'all today. I appreciate you for being kind to yourself, your neighbors, and your ancestors. And I will talk to you soon. Bye. Peace and love to everybody.